Again, for folks who are just joining us from the waiting room and for everyone who's been here the last couple minutes, we're really excited to have you for the Winter Food Systems Seminar. This is going to be a really exciting 10 weeks, and this is really the first session to kick us off. So we'll be doing kind of your expected introduction to the course, a kind of overview of the seminar. I'll be doing a very, very brief overview of the thematic topic for the seminar this session. And then we'll close out for the day by just talking about what to expect coming up in the next 8 weeks, where we'll have guest seminar speakers. So I'm going to share my screen. And get into slideshow view. So hopefully everybody on the Zoom today is an enrolled student in the seminar. This is at the 400 level for undergraduates and at the 500 level for graduate students. And the theme for this quarter, as you may have seen on the Canvas site, looking through the materials, is all about food rescue innovation. And so some of you may have come to the seminar already having a sense of what this might mean. And many of you may be curious, what does food rescue even mean? So that's kind of what we're going to unpack and frame today in the course of our time together. So a bit of an overview of what we're going to do. We'll start the seminar overall with a land acknowledgement and also some resources that you may already be aware of, but I think it's good to mention when we talk about the importance of acknowledging the land that Seattle is on and the UW as well. We'll provide introduction. So I'll give more of an in-depth introduction of myself as the instructor. Our reader grader Bridget will also have the chance to introduce their self. And then we're going to learn about you as well to the best of our ability using Poll Everywhere. I will provide an overview of the seminar. So I know some people learn from reading and others learn from listening and also visually seeing. So the Canvas site may be a great resource for many, but this will also provide you with kind of an auditory explanation of what to expect in the seminar. And then, as I mentioned before, I'm going to use this session to really provide a brief overview on some definitions and concepts related to the overarching theme of food rescue innovation that we'll get to explore together through the experts that we'll have in the coming weeks. And then at every session, I'll give you an update on what's happening next week. This has become, I think, even more important in COVID world. So not only will we get to review who's going to be joining us next week and presenting, but we'll also talk about the logistics of what the next week might look like, just changing on a daily basis. Okay, so first I'd like to give a land acknowledgement, and this is the land acknowledgement that the School of Public Health shares, and I think this is shared by other schools at the University of Washington. So the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish people of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within this area. And of course, there are many indigenous groups who preceded the colonization period of the land that gave rise to the city of Seattle. And while acknowledgements are important, I think it's perhaps more important to share resources and opportunities for action. So I've included a link here from the University of Washington that lists a number of different organizations working towards awareness and also action for different indigenous groups in this area. And very exciting, UW Health Sciences, who some of you may be a part of this group through the college that you're with, has posted a really wonderful community book to read, which is called Braiding Sweetgrass. And I actually, before I was even at the University of Washington, I had the opportunity to read this book. It's about indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teaching of plants. So very applicable if you're interested in food systems. And I think this just provides a really wonderful opportunity to get more information on some of these topics. So please do check out these resources. And if you're not already reading this book, find it in whatever modality suits you. Hard copy, old school, maybe you've got a Kindle, maybe you like to, again, listen. There are lots of different ways to receive this information. Okay, so we're going to start with introductions. I know there's a lot on this slide. I just really couldn't help myself. My name is Dr. Alissa Bilfied, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm a very new assistant teaching professor at the School of Public Health in the University of Washington. Although I have been teaching for a number of years when I was a doctoral candidate at Tulane University in New Orleans. And then most recently, I'm coming to you all from the opposite climate of Washington. I was a faculty member at the University of Arizona in Tucson for the last couple of years. So curious if there are any Arizona folks out there. Yeah, it's a totally different place for sure than Seattle, but I couldn't be more excited to be here with you all, and especially to be in the School of Public Health. It's a really fantastic institution. My background is really interdisciplinary. So my undergraduate degree was actually in political science. I thought I was going to become a lawyer. I was really interested in environmental policy. That obviously didn't happen because I'm sitting here in front of you today. But it does really inform, I think, a lot of what I teach and what I research as it applies to the intersection between food policy and the food system. In my master's degree, I studied environmental policy and international development, and that was over in London, so maybe a more similar climate to Seattle. And then I had a gap in my academic training where I was a practitioner. So you can see some of the pictures below. My first gig out of grad school as a master's student was actually doing environmental policy for the state of Massachusetts. So if there are any Massachusetts folks or Boston folks in the room, it'd be great to hear from you. I was there for a number of years doing a lot of different kinds of policy work, but you can see this picture of discarded food waste below. One of my main roles at one point was actually enforcing the state's waste bans. And so this was like back in 2006, but the state of Massachusetts had implemented bans against disposing of recyclable or compostable materials. So I would go with one of my colleagues in like work boots and, you know, all this kind of, you know, neon yellow gear, hard hats. We would go to waste facilities. And if we saw compostable materials being disposed of, we would essentially trace back, you know, where that commercial waste came from. And we would provide both technical assistance and also fines to commercial companies that were throwing away food or any other types of recyclables. So from an early time in my career, I've been really passionate about source reduction of reusable materials and also usable foods as well. In the middle, you'll see a picture from a food literacy education workshop. I went on to found a nonprofit called the Cookbook Project, and we initially ran international workshops with community-based organizations. We did active workshops in 14 different countries, and then we moved to an online training model where we trained food literacy educators. So I have a lot of direct experience as well, working with community educators and also with young people in their communities, exploring the connection between food culture and food traditions, and also health, nutrition, and sustainability. And then finally, we come to sort of my transition back into academia. I became really interested in getting a PhD so I could conduct community-based participatory research. And so a lot of my research to date, in addition to my teaching, really focuses on sustainable food certification. So I'm really interested in looking at how systems of certification like fair trade, the organic certification, biodynamics, these types of systems impact farming communities and are also perceived by consumers in the food system. So I've worked with coffee growing communities in Guatemala. That's where this picture is from. Tea growing communities in Sri Lanka. And more recently, I've been working with chocolate entrepreneurs in countries that actually grow cacao. So the majority of chocolate is produced by US and European based countries, but these are really more and more examples of entrepreneurs in countries of origin that are not just helping to produce more sustainable cacao, but also creating value add to the local economy by actually producing the chocolate bars in country. So a lot of interesting background work, and I'm happy at any point to talk with folks if you're interested in learning more about that. So that is my introduction. We may or may not hear the seminar dogs. These are the dogs that are my dogs. They live in my house, but I thought I would introduce them in case we did get any barking. We've got Hoogly up at the top. He's the kind of tan one. We've got Abby in the middle. She's the one wearing like the little hiking boots. She's got sensitive paws. And then Dorje's got his tongue out at the bottom. They're a really funny crew, and usually they're very quiet. They mostly like to sleep, but there's a chance we could hear them. So if you do, you'll know where the sounds are coming from. And perhaps more importantly than introducing myself or the dog, the seminar dogs, I'd like to introduce Bridget Condren, who is our essential reader grader for the quarter. And Bridget, I'd love to give you the stage to kind of share more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Alissa. Wow, first of all, just thank you for sharing all that. What an interesting perspective and wealth of experience you bring to this class. I'm excited to learn with you this semester. So my name is Bridget Condren. I am in the Masters of Social Work program, actually, at the School of Social Work. And like Alissa, I have a very interdisciplinary background. So I've kind of had just so many different jobs. I've worked as a public school teacher here in Seattle. I've worked in outdoor education. I've worked in environmental justice and a lot in community organizing and political advocacy. And so I bring to this class, I think, just a lot of perspective of how the food system can kind of affect all those different pockets of life. And I'm very interested. I also, in undergraduate, had the opportunity to TA a class on the food industry as well. So I bring that background. Yeah, I'm very excited to meet you all. When I'm not in school, you can find me hiking around Seattle. So if you need any hiking recommendations, let me know. I'm sure Alissa does too with all those dogs. Yeah, and I'm excited for the semester with you all.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing, Bridget. And we're so curious to learn more about you all. It's a wonderful group, and we're excited to hear where you come from at the university. So we've got some Pull Everywhere slides. Let's cross our fingers on those. So the first one is just very broad. What are you studying? We want to know more about either your formal major or degree or areas within those that you're interested in. So Bridget's going to pop the link in for Pull Everywhere. It's very simple. It's just my last name, pullev.com/Bilfield, also at the top of the screen.
Alissa, I actually do not have access to the chat right now, unfortunately.
Let me see if I can get in there. We've got folks accessing it either way. That's really strange.
It's disabled for me too. I'm a student.
I also don't have the chat. That's really bizarre.
This happened in one of my classes the other day. I think, unfortunately, we can't change it while in the meeting.
Okay, well, we'll make sure to change it for the next time around. But in the meanwhile, we've got other options. Okay, cool. So we've got a lot of folks in health, public health, biochemistry. We've got business, economics, history, electrical engineering. This is awesome. This is so exciting. We're going to have such a great Q&A session for our guest seminar presenters. I can only imagine psychology, biochemistry. Awesome. Okay, we'll give a little bit more time for folks to get in their answers to what they're studying. A lot of public health folks, astronomy, We've got people double majoring, aerospace, microbiology. Excellent. I think this group could probably take over the world. It's really impressive. Okay, they keep coming in. This is great. Thanks for sharing. And again, I think this is what makes the seminar so rich is, and really, I think what makes, you know, my job and Bridget's job so fulfilling is just learning from you about all of your perspectives, because each of you are going to kind of view the different seminar presentations through your academic lenses and through the lens of your, you know, personal and life experience. And the insights that you share are so rich. We may need to work on some way of kind of sharing out some high level insights that come through on a weekly basis so that you can all benefit from that as well. Okay, awesome. So hopefully you've had the chance to participate, although I see a couple more still coming in. We're going to, these will continue to come in, and I'll definitely be sharing this word cloud with our presenters so they also have a sense of, you know, the different disciplines that you're bringing to the table for our sessions. So we're going to move on to the next slide, which is, where are you from? So this may be where you were born and where you were raised. It might be your adopted home. It could be your neighborhood in Seattle if you identify with that geographic area. Whatever sort of the most significant for you. And I should say, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. So lovingly referred to it as the mistake on the lake.
Excuse me? Are we supposed to be typing this in the chat?
Yeah, so it's poll everywhere. The link is pollev.com/Bilfield. So if you can see the slides, the link is up at the top there.
Oh, I can't see.
I actually can't see the link on the slides.
You can't see the link on the slides. Okay, so it's pollev.com/Bilfield, BILFIELD. And unfortunately, we realized that for some reason, the chat is disabled for everyone. So otherwise, we'd pop it in there for you. But for future reference, we'll put the Poll Everywhere link on the Canvas site. So if speakers in the coming weeks if speakers in the coming weeks do use it, then you'll have access to it via Canvas as well. Okay, so we have got a ton of responses to this one. We've got a lot of Seattle, Washington folks, Colorado, Massachusetts, some neighborhood references, Bothell, Chengdu, Philippines, Alaska, China. This is awesome. Los Angeles, Vancouver, Cincinnati. People are from everywhere. This is so great. This is one thing that I've really come to love about University of Washington is how diverse in every way the student and staff and faculty community is. It's really wonderful. So we've got a lot of reference points. I saw Tucson in there. We'll have to talk burritos. I'm missing them here in Seattle. Maybe Seattle folks have good recommendations for burritos. Okay, not to essentialize Tucson to one.
Come to the south end of Seattle for burritos.
Oh, okay, good. That's a good reference. Yes. Okay, excellent. We still have so many coming in. People are referring to a lot of places that are important to them. Just good to get a sense of, you know, where folks are coming from. So we've got one more poll everywhere, and then we'll move forward. So get ready. It's poll EV /Bilfield, right? My last name. Okay, so the next one is, what is your favorite food that uses leftover or scrap ingredients? Curry, yeah. And this could be like kitchen sink, fill in the blank. Fried rice, yes. Spaghetti. Scrambled eggs, yeah, you can kind of throw anything in there. Hot pot, enchiladas. I love this. I'm a really big fan of making pesto out of anything. So any kind of green that's about to maybe start wilting, turn it into a pesto. This is fun. Ramen, flautas, nachos. Excellent. Well, hopefully over the course of this seminar, since we are focusing on food loss and food waste, we can continue to kind of share some of these, the personal ways that we try to fight food waste in our own lives. Yeah, fried rice, that's always like a go-to. I love that that one's winning out currently in terms of the majority of people's favorite recipes. Okay, excellent. Well, thanks for sharing. We've got more coming in, and we may even be able to provide some space in the Canvas site for people to continue sharing some of these ideas. Kitchen hacks, I think we're calling them these days. Okay, so we're going to move on, but really great to learn more about you and also your individual entry point to the seminar. Okay, so I just want to start with a broad overview. It's kind of like our typical first day of the class Redux. So our approach is really to support a very engaging classroom environment. And I think there are some essential ingredients that contribute to that. And Bridget, if I've missed any, feel free to join in. The first one, always important, is communication. And so we'll do our best to continue to try to communicate as clearly as possible to you the expectations and logistics around the course. And we hope that you will as well communicate with us directly about any needs that you have, support that you might need. If there are resources you're trying to access, we can also be a communication point for that. So we realize that we're entering into another uncertain quarter. And so the baseline thing we can all do to try to really support each other is to just communicate and be really open in our communication. Timely communication can also help, but baseline communication is essential. The second point is around flexibility. So I'm sure you've heard this time and time again. And Bridget and I were just reflecting on this before the seminar, that we've all cultivated really a wonderful amount of flexibility over this last year and a half. And so now we kind of just get to continue to put into practice many of these adaptive skills that we've all learned over the last year and a half, and have probably been building throughout your life in other contexts. The third point is around inclusivity. So as you can see from some of those poll everywhere questions, we've got students enrolled in the seminar who are coming from really different geographic places, who have been influenced by a lot of different cultures and places and experiences and educational perspectives. And so we're an inherently interdisciplinary group, which is wonderful from a learning perspective, but we also want to make sure that we're kind of mindful and supportive of that diversity in the classroom setting, especially. The fourth point is integrity. So as we enter into another kind of COVID-related quarter, I realize that you all have probably adapted strategies for success. And so to the extent that you can continue with those kind of healthy strategies and do that in a way that really embraces, values related to academic honesty, we encourage your continued progress on that path. The second to last point is engagement. So I know that it's really easy to just kind of pop into the Zoom room and then do a million other things on the side. Totally get that. I do that as well sometimes. We'd love for you to try to minimize, to the extent that you can, any distractions when you come into the seminar. We want you to be present, and we want you to have a really enriching educational experience. So please be mindful of that as you join us in our sessions. And then finally, the last part is co-creation. So we've also built up a lot of skills of how we can connect to each other remotely. And so Bridget and I really encourage that you interact with us in whatever way makes the most sense to you and is respectful of your colleagues in the course. So when we're in seminar and we have these amazing experts and innovators coming to share with us, be there, be ready with questions, be engaged, and help us, not only set a good environment for our guest lecturers, but create a really wonderful setting for learning for everyone who's in the seminar. Bridget, anything you want to add?
That all sounds awesome.
Okay, great. So we are going to move on to the kind of nitty-gritty details. This is all on your syllabus as well, but I'm reviewing it in the seminar for folks also. So I'm the main instructor for the course, and my department is environmental and occupational health sciences. I'm also with the nutritional sciences program and core faculty for food systems, nutrition, and health. You can contact me using Canvas messaging, and I've already received a number of messages from folks, so keep it up. If you do want to meet for office hours, I'm really happy to do so. Just reach out to me and we can find a time to meet. Right now, that's mostly happening via Zoom, and as the quarter progresses, we'll see how things are looking. Bridget introduced themselves as well from the School of Social Work, and you can also contact them using Canvas messaging. So you made it here. You probably already know the information below, but the seminar is every Friday from 12:30 to 1:20. Our actual assigned room is Kane Hall 130, and we're hoping to be there at some point in the quarter. So when that time comes, we'll look forward to seeing you all in person there. COVID, it's continuing. We're still here. It's sort of interesting to reflect back on this period of time and see, the evolution of our collective experience in the pandemic. So we're going through the Omicron wave, and as such, you probably received a lot of messages about COVID, I'm sure, from every single person that you've talked to at the university. The most recent message came in from the president, actually just before the seminar, and essentially the message, shared what we all know, which is that the community is at pretty high risk for spread, and the hospital systems, most importantly, are really, under a lot of pressure. So as a result, we are going to have the next couple of weeks continue remotely via Zoom. So the great news about the seminar is we have a lot of really awesome experts coming in from different parts of the country. And so our next two sessions, we were going to be joined by our guest speaker via Zoom anyhow. So instead of folks showing up to Kane Hall and potentially, putting a big group of folks at risk, we're going to continue with remote sign-in for the next 2 weeks. So that's the 14th and then the 21st after that. So if you do have any questions at any point about that, please reach out. And again, we'll try to follow through with regular and clear communication about what the expectations are. When in doubt, you can message one of us or check Canvas to see what's going on. We'll be sure to list the modality of the session in the module for that week. So you'll see, sign in via Zoom, here's the Zoom link, or so happy to see your faces in Kane Hall when that happens. When we do go back to the Kane Hall environment, we'll be following university protocols for COVID. So whatever those look like at that time. And again, thank you so much for continuing to be flexible and adaptable. This course hopefully should be something that you enjoy this quarter. It's not very complicated. You basically show up, ask engaging questions, and get to listen to these really, again, engaging experts in their field. So it's a 1-credit course. You either get credit or you don't get credit. So the pressure is off, which is great. You need to get 75% of the total points available to achieve credit. And so what that looks like is for undergraduate students, so if you're at the 400 level, for our 8 guest speakers, you need to turn in 5 short reflections. So it's like a half a page of, similar to kind of a more formal blog, I would say, or sharing of insights. 5 of those you need to write a reflection for to get credit. Today, you don't need to write a review, and the last day, you also don't need to write a review. It's just the substantive weeks in the middle. In addition to those 5 reflections, for the 400 level undergraduate students, you'll also post a 1-page final reflection. And again, just really broad, what did you learn from the course? What were highlights? What were insights? And we're really just looking to see that you were paying attention, that you showed up, that you use your critical thinking and analysis to kind of put together thoughtful reflections from the overall theme. For the 500 level course students, so if you're at the graduate level and you're taking this course, you will just turn in one final summative paper at the end. So in that paper, we really just want to see, again, that you've been showing up to seminar. We want to see reference points to specific details and a synthesis of the presentations as they apply to the overall theme. So as we start to get into the weeks with presentations, we'll continue to remind you about these opportunities to submit weekly for undergrads, and then at the end of course, everyone will have some sort of summative paper. So these are all your responsibilities for the course. Pretty straightforward, nothing too complicated. And if at any point you do have a question about this, just reach out. We're here to help. Okay, so an overarching overview. You've probably already seen this snapshot of what we have in store for us over the coming 8 weeks. This is essentially one of the main things I was working on in the fall, in addition to doing a ton of writing for a book project. I was really recruiting all of these amazing speakers for the seminar. And so we've got folks coming from all over the country to present, and also experts and innovators from Seattle who are really at the forefront of innovation in food rescue. So we've got 8 innovators and experts that are going to come to present to us, and each of them has been selected to share their perspectives and experiences working at different parts of the food supply chain and the food system. So we're going to kind of jump into the more technical side of our session for today. I'm going to provide some framing for us as we move into these guest lectures. So framing food rescue. I realize that some of you are coming from nutritional sciences. We do have some public health folks. Many of you may have been exposed to concepts related to the food system before, but for those who haven't, I thought it would be important to first start out with this infographic, which is actually taken from one of our readings for the week. So we've got an FAO reading, an academic journal article, and also a video. And this is from the academic journal article. And it's just a really simple, the most kind of pared down icon of the food supply chain. So we start linearly with agriculture, right? Our food is either grown through farming and cultivation, harvested, or it's produced through animal husbandry, and when we talk about animal products. The next part of the food supply chain at a very basic level is food processing and manufacturing. And so this includes essentially taking raw ingredients from farming and harvesting and husbandry to drying, milling, grinding. So how we get from rice and wheat, for example, to flour. Secondarily, it might also include mixing, cooking, and molding, depending on what the product is. Then we come to retail. So this is probably where most folks have interfaced for most of their lives. These are where markets are, grocery stores, bakers, supermarkets. So where you would actually buy food in the modern food supply system. And then finally, consumption. So we've all definitely played a role in the consumption piece of the food supply chain. And this really happens at the household level. So wherever you're living here on campus and in Seattle, your own home kitchen, in the food service industry. So in restaurants, in the hospitality sector, coffee shops and cafes, and then also at institutions. So on-campus dining, for example, would fall into this category. Any educational institute, hospitals, prisons, these types of environments. So very broadly at a high level, this is kind of a snapshot of the food supply chain. So I'm curious, I know you all have probably had different experiences throughout your life, We've got one additional poll everywhere question. And this is, which part of the food system have you had the most experience with, either personally or professionally? So we can all probably say consumption, but I'm curious to see if people have been involved in farming, maybe in food processing or manufacturing, and also in retail as well. Okay, so we've got a lot of consumers here, a good amount in retail, some folks in ag as well. Cool. This is great to see. So I think that this course is really going to be provide a really interesting window for folks into some of these other areas, especially agriculture, food processing and manufacturing, and also retail, where we're going to have speakers who are trying to address the challenges of food loss and food waste in those areas. We will also get to consumption, but I know y'all are most familiar with that. Okay, excellent. Well, thanks for participating there. So let's get to some definitions. Food rescue, what does that mean? It's also sometimes synonymously used with the term food recovery. Food rescue involves saving food from loss or waste while prioritizing the food recovery hierarchy. And so this triangle that you see to the right was created by the EPA, and it's also been used in a number of other settings as well to kind of highlight, based on the value of food, how much energy and resources it takes to produce food. When you're thinking about addressing food rescue, what are the priorities that should be focused on for food recovery? So at the top level, the biggest priority is just reducing surplus that's generated. So reducing the loss and the waste that comes from that. That makes sense, right? At the second level, if there is excess food, feeding people comes next, and especially feeding hungry people. So food insecurity is a topic that we'll definitely be discussing in some of our sessions during the seminar. Feeding animals, so using parts of what we might consider waste, but is really a resource from the food system to feed animals. The next part would be industrial use. And then we get to composting, and the very least preferred method of food recovery is landfilling or incineration. And that's for a number of reasons, but one of the largest reasons to avoid landfilling and incinerating, especially organic waste, is the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that's produced through those methods, especially in the form of methane gas. So let's look in more detail at what food loss and food waste means. They sound like really intuitive terms, but I think it's important as we set out on the seminar to be really explicit about what we're talking about. So food loss, as opposed to food waste, occurs when food suppliers are not able to use food that is produced. So this is before it even enters the sort of buying supply chain. So loss could occur during storage, transportation, and processing. And we're going to talk a bit more about that today. Food waste, on the other hand, occurs at the final consumption stage. And this is where purchasing decisions are made by consumers or by retailers that results in food waste. And so this is maybe what most of us that have had exposure to. So when we think about, how can we use food scraps in our home kitchens to reduce food waste, or how can we be mindful when we order food from restaurants or buy it at grocery stores to make sure that we're only buying as much as we need. What we talk about there is food waste as opposed to food loss, which is primarily really at the start of the food supply chain. So what does this look like in terms of the numbers? Some of you may have heard this statistic, which is the global food loss and waste. So both of those types of sort of misuse of food resources accounts for about a third of food that's produced. So a third of food that's produced in the world, on estimate, is lost or wasted every year. And that accounts for 1.3 billion tons of wasted food. So it's hard to conceptualize the weight of that, but it's an incredible amount. And in terms of its economic value, that's equivalent to $1 trillion US. This is annually, so on an annual basis. And these are statistics from the Food and Agriculture Organization. And then if we drill down a little bit deeper, we can see from this third of food that's wasted, what is it comprised of? So estimates show that 45% of that food are fruit and vegetables. And that makes sense, right? It's probably the food that's the most perishable. 35% is fish and seafood, 30% cereals and grains, 20% of all dairy is wasted, and 20% of meat and poultry is wasted. And so it's important to also consider the environmental impact of this waste. So the food and agriculture data showed us, the quantity and what the value is economically. But if we look at this data from the World Resources Institute, we can see that if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitting country in the world. So I think that really puts into perspective the environmental impact of food loss and food waste. And so in addition to the fact that this is an overarching and important topic, as we were going through the fall and kind of hearing from the COP26 summit on climate change and just thinking about the intersection of the food system with climate change, food waste and loss is one area where human civilization has a huge opportunity to make an impact. And so that's kind of the inspiration for the seminar, is to, engage you all in thinking about these opportunities and learning from folks who are actually at the forefront of addressing some of the myriad of challenges that exist in reducing food waste and loss in the food value chain. So why does it matter and what are the impacts? There are obviously huge economic impacts, both at the global level, and then also even when we think down to our own individual level, right? In your own home kitchen with your own food budget, when food goes to waste, you're not just, that's not just a misnutrition opportunity. It's not just impacting the environment, but it's also impacting your household food budget, right? And that goes, all the way up at all levels of the system. From a health perspective, especially for the food insecure, we have this sort of mind-boggling situation where we're producing, good food that could, in theory, be distributed to populations that don't have equal access. And so it's not just sort of a nutrition impact, but also a health equity impact as well. And I encourage you to think about that as we're listening to our guest speakers in the coming weeks. And then the environmental impact. So the fact that food waste and loss is, the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, if it were considered to be in a country, is just really astounding. And so again, I think this presents a number of low-hanging fruit opportunities for the folks that we'll hear from. And I hope as well, that some of you are, if you're not already doing work in this area, that you're inspired to potentially pursue this in the future. So let's dig a little bit deeper into some of the content from our articles. So these are kind of highlights. I do encourage you to go through the readings yourselves as well. If you're more of a visual person, look at the diagrams. Those often condense and summarize a lot of what's most important in the article. And this is one, this is from the FAO Chapter 1, a really wonderful example that kind of demonstrates the definition we were just talking about before. So we've got food loss in the center, and that really accounts for on-farm, post-harvest, and slaughter operations. So again, food loss is something that happens before the food even enters sort of the buying chain in the food system. Food loss may also happen during transportation, storage, and distribution, as I mentioned before, and potentially during processing and packaging. And then, as I mentioned in that other slide, food waste occurs at the retail and also the household level. So keep that in mind as we go through the presentations in the coming weeks, and also as you kind of think about your own personal impact and the impact of all of these different efforts that we'll learn about. There's another really great diagram in this FAO chapter that kind of conveys the scope of the problem and really drills down into some of the different ways that food loss and food waste happens. So we'll hear a lot more about this next week from our guest speaker coming from the World Resources Institute. But this is a good way, especially for folks who haven't been exposed to this content before, to kind of prime yourself to try to understand the complexity of the food system and why some of this seemingly illogical, loss and waste is happening. So, on the farm, you can imagine that weather, different circumstances with harvesting, especially in sort of the weather chaos that's been happening with climate change, and also different, farming practices, labor shortages, harvest schedules. It's so complicated at the farm level that there are a lot of opportunities for innovation to try to prevent food loss in that stage. In storage and transportation, this is huge, and especially in countries that don't have as developed storage infrastructure, so cold storage. Think about all those leafy greens. If they're not stored properly, or dairy and animal products, if that's not able to be stored properly before it even hits the retail market, of course, there are going to be challenges with waste, but also opportunities to intervene as well. And then going down the line, you can dig in deeper as you go through the materials. There are a lot of potential direct causes and drivers of food loss and waste. You may be more familiar with those happening at the consumer level. So in our own refrigerators and pantries, there's all of these dates and labels that may or may not indicate when food is quote unquote spoiled. That's another topic that I'm sure we'll get into. What is that even based on? There could be confusion between expiration and also preferred consumption dates, storage, and also just food management in the house. And then, oversized portions, having too much of a certain food and it goes bad, or not necessarily knowing how to use food as a sort of scrap. Although it seems like this group is pretty savvy from those recipes that we saw earlier. So again, this is, if you haven't already dug into the readings, I really encourage you to do so. And again, if you prefer looking at images, there are lots of great images that kind of summarize some of this high-level content. So food rescue is a global challenge, and that's why it's really been at the focus of one of the main United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So the UN Sustainable Development Goals kind of encompass the biggest challenges that we face as a human society. And they're wide-ranging, anything from gender equity to poverty to responsible consumption and production. And so that's where the issue of food rescue really comes in at Sustainable Development Goal number 12. And so 12.3 calls a very aspirational goal for halving, excuse me, it's kind of a strange word, halving per capita global food waste at the retail and consumer levels and reducing food loss along the food supply chain by 2030. So it's a very aspirational goal. And I'm hoping that as we go through the quarter, you'll kind of see some of the larger, not just personal ways that we can make changes in our own homes, but more importantly, the structural and systemic ways that businesses and nonprofits and government organizations are creating innovations to help really address the scale of the challenge, because it is really giant and global in nature. So innovation, this is a term that gets thrown around a lot. And most recently, I'm coming from an entrepreneurship center in a business school. So while I'm trained in public health, I was teaching business school students. So happy to have some of you in the seminar. The term innovation is really simple, and it means the action or process of innovating. That's kind of obvious, but more importantly, coming up with a new method, idea, or product. And so that's what we're going to see in the coming weeks. Once we get this broad overview from the World Resources Institute, you're going to actually get to learn about the nuances of how individuals have created organizations and efforts that are creating new methods, ideas, and products to address food loss and food waste. And so this doesn't just happen in one sector, and often it's a multi-sector collaboration. So that's another lens that I'd love for you to take with you as we're going through our seminar sessions. What are the ways in which an individual organization is creating collective impact? Maybe it's between the public sector and the private sector, or nonprofit organizations. Maybe it's a collaboration of all three. So this will be really interesting for you to take this lens with you as we go through the presentations in the coming weeks. We're almost towards the end of my slides. This is the last one, I think. So finally, I'd also like you to think through the social ecological model, which for public health folks, you'll know this really well. But this is a model that kind of looks at the way that we're nested as individuals in society. We've got our individual selves and experiences at the center, our family and our peers, the organizations we're embedded in, community, and then policies. So all these different levels affect food loss and food waste. And I'd love for you to keep this in mind as you're listening to our guest presenters. At what levels of this system are they working at? So what sectors are they coming from and who are they collaborating with? And then where are they addressing the problem? Some of them may be addressing it at the policy level. Some of them may be addressing it at the organizational level. So keep that in mind as we're listening to these guest speakers. So here's a snapshot just of the logos of folks who we have joining us. So, please really keep in mind the principle of integrity as we have folks joining us. These are guests who, many of them are very well known in their fields, have incredible accolades, are really well respected, and are doing amazing work. So please bring your attention, bring your co-creative questions to the table, and really bring your curiosity as well, because this is an opportunity to learn from some incredibly creative folks. So we have a lot to look forward to, which is good. Up next week, we're a couple minutes over. We've got Brian Lipinski from the World Resources Institute. So he's really going to provide a detailed overview of food loss and waste from a global perspective that will give you more background information, especially those coming from kind of a non-food systems area of study. So we'll look forward to that. We will be joining Brian. He'll be calling in from Washington, D.C., where he's based, and we'll all be remote on Zoom. So please join us again in the Zoom room next week. And then I realize that the chat's disabled for today. We'll get that fixed for next week. If you do have questions, feel free to stick around now and ask any questions to us directly, or you're welcome to send a Canvas message to either Bridget or I. But in the meantime, it's been really great having you here for this first session. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm also going to stop recording.